Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I am hosting Jamie Lerner. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with Jamie, she is an integrative well-being therapist and co-authored the book, The Ever-Loving Essence of You. She puts a fresh spin on just about anything that anyone throws her way. Her unique and masterful ability to reframe even the most difficult situations is astounding. All of a sudden, your biggest nightmare becomes your greatest pleasure as she lovingly helps you sift through the contrast and find that small opening of light that quickly becomes your greatest jumping off point for clarity. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I did a little homework and sifted through the book a little bit, so I'm excited. At first, I want you to share a little bit more about yourself, who you are, what you do, and what led you to be doing the work that you're doing today.
I was born with a knowing, and I think we all are. And then just through the contrast of life, I think that we get further and further away from our inner knowing, inner being. But I always stayed true to the sound of my own voice because that became almost a intuitive survival skill from a very early age. So, I've always been interested in psychology and interpersonal relationships, and I got my master's in social work and went on to have a practice and realized that what I was doing to assist people and asking them to look back all the time wasn't really assisting them in moving forward. So I gave that up and traveled and studied, and now I do something called the integrative approach to well-being. And I assist people in assisting themselves to where they are and to where they want to go.
I love that. And I love how you brought intuition in because that was a huge lesson for me my whole entire life to be able to trust myself. What would you say to people who are struggling with that in their life? You know, it sounds like it came really easy for you. You were open to that inner knowing, you trusted it and followed it. What advice do you have for our listeners right out of the gate for following their intuition?
Well, I don't give advice, but I have a suggestion. I think that if you could acknowledge that you hear your own voice, even if it's faint, I think that's a really good first step because by acknowledging it, you're making a choice. So, can we hear it and then choose not to listen? I think that that's very powerful. But to believe that it doesn't exist, I think that that's unfortunate because that is truly our guiding light to our highest and greatest self. So, acknowledgement and then choice. I heard it. I chose not to listen to it. I think that's great. Over time, you can make different choices. Um, I've never heard anyone say, I should not have listened to myself. And I hear people all the time say, I should have listened to myself. So
Mhm.
I think ultimately we are our own greatest resource and we do know best for ourselves, not for other people, but for ourselves.
That's interesting. You said not for other people because I think so quickly people can, you know, give advice or give suggestions, especially if they are tapped into their intuition instead of allowing. What has been your road to allowing?
I think that I was really fortunate to be born into the family I was born into because my parents, I, you know, they had no idea what they were doing. But in some ways, that was such a gift to all of us because we really didn't have much to push against. And so, in many ways, that allowed me in particular to really tune into my intuitive knowing and then also allow others to be where and who they were because I was so clear about where I was with myself and who I was. And I think that's the key, that when we really come to know ourselves and relax into ourselves, then we really don't care what other people are doing because it's none of our business. And we're just happy to meet them where they are and who they are. And that's really a lovely place to be with others.
Hmm. It really is. Let's go back to the intuition and dig in a little bit more on self trust. And you had said, nobody has ever said, I'm, disappointed that I didn't follow my intuition. But a lot of us have said, oh, I wish I had followed it. There it was. If someone's thinking, like, how do I, take the steps to trust myself and follow my intuition when society has basically been questioning me my whole life?
Once again, I think just to sit with yourself and become familiar with that inner voice. And over time, you could acknowledge it 100 times. And just the acknowledgement that you're hearing it, I think you do begin to trust yourself and look within instead of looking outside of ourselves for every answer. And there is nothing outside of ourselves. And I just feel like that practice of the acknowledgement is like such a wonderful way to get to really trusting ourselves and knowing ourselves and loving ourselves and appreciating ourselves.
Yeah, and you discuss that in the book, acknowledging yourself, trusting yourself, loving yourself. So the journey of self-love, I think, has really been important in my life. Can you discuss like what you talk about in the book around self-love and the impact that that has on us?
It's a very gentle book that's just a loving reminder that we are there for ourselves 24/7. And when we do consult ourselves and appreciate ourselves, and it's not about the appreciation of others, because that does not sustain us. But when we acknowledge and appreciate ourselves, even if it's just one moment, one thought at a time, I think it really becomes very satisfying, gratifying, and we tend to look inward for inner acknowledgement. Today I went to a really difficult Pilates class, and when I come out of there, I hear myself say to myself, like, good job, Jamie. Like, that's enough for me. And as silly as that sounds, that is sustains me all day long. But for someone else to say good job, for some reason, it just doesn't last. So to be able to validate yourself from the inside out, I think is really it's just it's everything.
Hmm. So what is that journey to self-love? Because a lot of people struggle with that.
Well, I think we have to quiet the mind chatter. And I think most of us are unaware of the mind chatter. And when we isolate it, I think that we could only laugh because nobody would speak to us the way we speak to ourselves. And nobody would speak to another the way we speak to ourselves. So I think we're really hard on ourselves. And it doesn't even matter where that came from. Like it could have been from family of origin. Someone told us we were whatever we were, and we just hung on to that. But to hear it, to laugh about it because it's only funny and 90% of it is not true. And then to kind of check in with yourself and say, like, is that true in my now? And ask yourself, like, is it true? For most of us, none of it's true. So that's another way to kind of consult yourself and do an update. We update everything. But
Mhm.
why not update our own thoughts and feelings about where we are with ourselves in a moment?
I like that you pointed out to like asking yourself, is it true? That's one of the things that I just love from the book, The Four Agreements, is, checking in with yourself and asking yourself, is this true? Because a lot of times it's not. It's funny, I was watching a documentary recently about being a minimalist, and I practice minimalism myself. And they were highlighting how society, through advertising, used to be mainly on TV, but now it's switched from being mainly on TV, mainly internet and, our phones and the social media and that sort of thing. And in the advertisement, it's basically telling us over and over again how not enough we are. We're not enough unless we have this car or these clothes or this house or this next best thing or the new iPhone or whatever. So what suggestion would you give for people who like they were being bombarded constantly with, these messages that were not good enough? What would you say to that person who's like struggling with all of the pressure that they're feeling and that feeling of not enough?
To probably limit the amount of time that they're on social media and on the computer and on Facebook where it's filled with comparison because I don't think that that's helpful or reassuring in any way for people. And that's something we do have a control over. We can choose the news that we want to consume. We can choose the advertising that we tune into. And I think we're not used to hearing that it is our choice. We feel like in some ways we're a victim to social media, which is absolutely not the case at all. Our greatest superpower is taking personal responsibility and make good choices for ourselves. And I think that when we step up and do that, even if it's a choice to engage, at least you're engaged, you know what is happening, and you're acknowledging it. And I think that that's something to applaud as well. But to be
Yeah,
a
me too.
victim, no.
Yeah, I think that's, really good that you brought up that because a lot of times, we do place ourselves in victimhood and we don't feel like we have a choice. But every day we wake up, we do have a choice. Like even, kind of flipping a switch if we wake up in a bad mood, flip it, and set our intentions for the day and try to do something that will lift ourselves up and flip us into something a little bit different. And you talk about that as well, being able to shift, from one state of being into another.
Yes, and it's really nice when you have that control and use that power to do just that. Um, it does require a little more time with yourself to manage everything that we are choosing to be exposed to. But I think that's a good thing to get to know yourself and to like yourself and to appreciate yourself. And that really doesn't come from necessarily being with other people. When you feel that way, you bring that sense of self to other relationships. And that's where it's really fun.
Mm-hmm. And I want to, talk a little bit more about choice too, because that has been, taken from us. I think in a lot of ways, in our society, and I've talked about this before on other podcasts, um, episodes, and just like taking our power back. And that's a big thing for me. And with my clients is take our power back. And we don't realize how often we've handed over our power to other people, places, and things.
Unfortunately, it doesn't happen without us handing it over, which is really a tough thing for people to hear. Um, but it is a choice, even if it's an unconscious choice, and that's fine too. Unconsciously, you realize at the end of the day that you got sucked into whatever you got sucked into, but you got sucked in. You weren't sucked in, you got sucked in, which means you allowed yourself to be in whatever place that is. And once again, I don't think there's a problem with that. It is once the acknowledgement though that gives you kind of the freedom uh, to not be the victim anymore to anything or anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also think that not making a choice is also a choice.
Yes, it really is. Absolutely is, which people don't really understand, but it is.
Mhm. So, what would you share with our listeners around, making good choices for ourselves? Having that acknowledgement, having the awareness within ourselves to be able to see when we're handing our power away and where we need to kind of step out or look within or have awareness over where we're doing that in our lives.
I think when we're a little bit more tuned into how we're feeling about things, so to navigate a situation through how you are feeling about whatever it is you're choosing, I think that's really helpful. And if it's something that you're not feeling good about, to take some time and to really give yourself permission to not make the choice, but to kind of think about it and get yourself into alignment until you can feel good about making the choice for yourself. And once again, it can only be for yourself. We try to avoid making choices for ourselves by telling everybody else what they should be doing. And I think that we don't have that power or knowledge to be able to tell other people what they should or should not be doing. But we do have that power to tell ourselves and to choose to listen to what we're telling ourselves. And there are some days that we hear it and we're choosing not to listen. And once again, that's fine. It's not a bad thing. The acknowledgement is the most important thing.
Yes. I find that the work that we do in the world reflects us. It's an expression of ourselves. So I'm curious, what was it that brought you to co-authoring The Ever-Loving Essence of You?
So this book was written with a very good friend of mine that's really known our family and my mom for a long time, and it was a tribute to my mom. And when I was born, I didn't have a connection with my mom, and from my earliest memory, I didn't have that connection, and so I think intuitively, I just really tuned in to myself, knowing that that was that was all I had, which was a lot, you know. So, um, and throughout half my life, I was trying to figure out like, what is it that I could do or be or um, create that would allow this connection between my mom and I to occur. And I realized that the reason I wasn't connected to her is that she wasn't really connected to herself. Now, she was an amazing force of nature. Like, she just lived 48 hours in every day. She was really wonderful. But a lot of what she did was to avoid creating the relationship that she could have had with herself. And so she got sick and she had scleroderma and she got very sick and she was in the ICU for several days and I sat with her and she was intubated on a breathing tube and I felt like all the love from her pouring to me. I thought, wow, this is going to be the beginning of our mother and daughter relationship. And then she transitioned. So, um,
Hmm.
after she transitioned, it was really important to me that my message be the importance of having a connected relationship with yourself so that you can go on and have connected relationships with other people if you choose. And Lauren and I sat down and we wrote this book in a weekend. I mean, it just poured through me, and I just think the message is so important. And really, in this book, it's delivered in such a simple and loving way. There's no psycho babble or jargon or anything. You can open the book at any point, read any page. And so, yeah, it's really like 13 years old now, and I read it every month, and it's pretty timeless. So,
Wow, that's wonderful. Hmm. What gifts, come to our lives from our experiences are beautiful. What would you say the message is through this book to everyone? What did you want to bring the collective?
to know yourself, to love yourself, to trust yourself, to appreciate yourself. And I don't think that life needs to feel so heavy. Like, we need to be a little lighthearted and have a little levity about everything that's happening within us, around us. I think we just take it all too seriously. Um, so yeah,
How do we take that step back when life is feeling so serious? Because there's a lot going on. A lot of people are heavy, they're experiencing grief. What is that process of taking a step back from that heaviness and finding our center again?
I think when you start to really love and appreciate yourself, you nurture yourself and you nourish yourself back into connection. You can feel when you're going down that rabbit hole and you know what would be helpful for you to do in that moment to kind of take that step back and not end up at least all the way down the rabbit hole. Maybe you go halfway down and then allow yourself to know yourself so well that you make a choice to do something that feels really good and nourishing for yourself. And I ask people to start doing the things for themselves that they wish other people would do for them. And that becomes interesting because we are always wishing and wanting other people to do things for ourselves. And really, that's not their responsibility. Most of those people don't even know what those wishes are. But if we could start doing those things for ourselves, I think that's such a lovely way to reassure ourselves, to nourish ourselves, and to get ourselves back to a good feeling place.
What are some of the things that you do to nourish yourself, Jamie?
I wake up very early every morning and I sit with myself very quietly and I receive so much from wherever it all is coming from. And that's a really important time for me. And then I ask myself, what do I appreciate about myself? One thing, not what do other people appreciate about me, but do I appreciate about myself? And that sets the tone for the whole day. If I'm making a meal for another person, I make that same meal for myself, you know, and that goes for a lot of things. At my birthday or every holiday, I buy myself a gift, something I want. I wrap it beautifully. I write myself a card. I do all those things that people are always so disappointed about that other people haven't done right for them. And it feels good when you can really take care of yourself in that way.
Mm, lovely. What is something that you would like to bring forward from your book that you think is like the gold within the pages?
I think the ability to reframe anything at any given moment it's such a great skill for life. Um, does it mean that we're in denial about what has happened? No, we acknowledge whatever it is that is happening, but then we choose to find the silver lining in all of it. And there are many people in my life, including my children, adult grown children, that are very annoyed by this. And I let everyone else off the hook all the time. Whatever's happening, I take personal responsibility for it. And I really don't hold anyone else accountable because I don't have that control and it doesn't feel good. So when you are in that place where you're able to reframe a moment, a year, 10 years, I think that that is it's a coping mechanism, but it's also to find the silver lining in every single thing, I think is it's really helpful for us to navigate onto the next moment.
So for those listeners who might find themselves stuck in story, or they know, someone in their life that's stuck in story, can you give some examples of reframing that would benefit everyone?
Well, people every day, they dread getting in their car and going to work. They're going to work anyway, but they're already anticipating sitting in traffic. And that really sets the tone for not having a good day from the moment that they wake up. So anticipating getting to the office and every negative thing that they've experienced all day long is going to happen over again. So what if we chose to, on this particular day, just one day, get in our car, bring some coffee or something that you like to drink. Think about a podcast you'd like to listen to, have a list of phone calls that you need to return, or listening to music, and choose to do it differently just this one day. And allow that hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it is to be like personal time for you. Like all of a sudden you have this time to like do something for yourself. Now you're going to work either way. So you can go being miserable or you can go feeling good and having used that time to really nourish yourself and nurture yourself and feel good when you get there. So that's like a good example of something that we're doing every day and feel like we're the victim of and are stuck in every day. So it's pretty simple, and yet it's so powerful.
Reframing is powerful. I practice it myself, and I found, a release of not only emotions in the moment, but long term emotions as
Yeah.
well. Which brings me to like that heightened charge moment where we're triggered in somebody or something has, and there's a lot of something out in the collective right now that can trigger us. So in those moments, how can we reframe our experience to be able to decrease, minimize, or alleviate that charge that we get in our bodies?
I ask people to take three thoughts that make them feel good when they think about it and put it in their back pocket. And know that when you are in that moment, if you cannot reframe something or somebody or some whatever is happening in the world, in your home, that you reach for one of those thoughts. And I think that it's really helpful. It's a really like simple go-to and it works well. But you have to create it for yourself. You have to know like when you think about something specific, how it makes you feel. So the other thing too is to just go in nature, shut off all electronics and have a little time for yourself and just be reminded what there is in this world. There is so much beauty and so many things to appreciate. And yeah, I think it's like almost an automatic reset.
Mm, true, it is. That's one of the things that I do is go outside if I need a reset. For sure.
Yeah,
And movement. Yeah. Get my body movement moving. Go for that walk. Go hug a tree. That's also a
right.
thing. I was reading something this morning about just like going out and hugging a tree and what the benefits are of just doing that, you know. And I think that even just the simple act of being in nature, like you said,
Yeah.
is very clearing. I know one of the favorite things I like to do, especially on a windy day, is just open my arms and let the wind just blow out everything that does not belong to me. Yeah, just
And
release it
that's
all.
like 99%. I mean, really, we take on so much
Mhm.
unconsciously that's not ours. You know, I, it's like the socks in the dryer when you have to pull them all out and sort through them and know that there's a pair there, but you know, 99% of those pairs are not yours. There may be one pair, but you take it all on. Why? And if that's an excuse to not address yourself, acknowledge it. Like, okay, I'm taking all this on today. I need to avoid myself. Okay, give yourself permission to do that, but it's a choice.
Nice. I like that. It is a choice. And I think it's an important choice because our vibrational level or a vibrational, how do I want to put this? Being in the world, our vibrational energy in the world attracts to us what that vibration is.
Yes, it does. So it's like what we think about all day long. And what do we have? What we think about all day long. And what do we want? Not what we have and not what we're thinking about. So to be a little more conscious about what you're thinking about. What do you want? It's a big question for most people. A lot of people avoid that question. They prefer to think about what they don't want, which is great. It's contrast. So,
Yeah, but when we think about what we don't want, we attract more of what we don't want.
yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Yes. Back to flipping that switch again or reframing, as you say in your book. And it brings you like if you're making those choices and actually putting some effort into life creation, life design, manifestation, manifesting your best life, you're putting yourself in alignment. And you talk about that in your book, like how important it is to have that alignment within yourself. What suggestions would you give for our audience about like finding that alignment within yourself? Because I think that that trickles into every aspect of our lives.
I think we have to give ourselves permission to excuse ourselves and to think about what we're wanting or how we're wanting to respond to people or situations before we do. I think we feel so pressured to say yes without really understanding, like, but how do I really feel about doing what I'm being asked to do? And I think that creates problems because when we say yes to things we don't want to do, we show up um, not our best selves. So we're resentful of the people that have asked us or the situation. And that doesn't feel good to us, and it doesn't feel good to the people that we're showing up for. So, to give yourself permission to kind of step back and take some time to think about what you're being asked and just say, maybe I'm going to think about this and get back to you. And really think about it. Like, if it's not going to feel good to you, then excuse yourself.
What does alignment look like for you, Jamie?
Thoughts and feelings is one. So, when I'm being asked to do something, I really have to get myself into alignment with the task at hand in order to participate in it. Even if it's like an assignment for work. If I'm not feeling good about sitting down to do it, I don't. Is that called procrastination? Yes. Is procrastination our friend? Yes, because it gives us time to get into alignment with the task at hand. Now, we always get it done. Everyone has a different way of going about it, but ultimately, to wait until we feel good about it, I think that the outcome is usually brilliant. And when we don't, I think it's not so good.
Hmm.
So
Could that be a form of avoidance, though? Because I know I'm procrastinating on a current book that's been ruminating in me for like 6 or 7 years. And, I keep putting it on the back burner for publishing, my other books that I've published. And I just find it interesting how procrastination, I think, can sometimes be a block. So, how do we know the difference between procrastination as our friend and procrastination as a block?
I don't think that procrastination can necessarily be a block because I think that when you excuse yourself from the book, when you're able to say to yourself, like, I know myself, when I'm ready to sit down and write this, I will. And I'm just going to let myself off the hook right now because it's I'm just not there, and that's okay. And once we do that, it's so interesting because shortly after, we feel inspired to do that task. But we've had all this pressure on ourselves to do it. It's kind of like, there's a lot to push up against when you put that kind of pressure around needing to do something. As soon as you kind of remove the pressure, like my kids used to say, like, I don't have to clean my room. And I'd be like, no, you absolutely do not. But would you like to? And they're like, oh, yeah. It's just So I think you need to give yourself permission to just choose right now that you're not ready. And when you are, you won't write it. You'll sit down, it'll write itself, which usually is what happens when we write a book.
It does. And usually within a short amount of time, like yourself, how
Yes.
you were saying that you wrote it in a weekend with your friend.
Yes.
It is true. It is true. I pulled a quote from the alignment section of your book, which I thought was great, especially since I've written a book on sex magic. I think this is fantastic. And I practice Tantra. Sex is the physical extension of our expression of how we feel about ourselves.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Talk a little bit about that because, this is a highlighted thing, action, expression of ourselves. But I think just talking about this one thing will highlight everything in our lives.
I I believe that how we feel about ourselves is how we approach everything
Mm-hmm.
and how we participate in any interaction with another. And when we are loving ourselves, we love everybody because we are seeing everything and everyone through that same lens. And I think in terms of sex, especially, it's our individual responsibility to show up feeling good and not expect another is going to pleasure or please us. Um, it just doesn't happen that way. So if two people can come together feeling really good about themselves, I think they're co-creating something amazing. Whether it's cooking, whether it's shopping, whether it's sex, no matter what it is, dining together. But I think that is huge.
And I think you said a key word too, expectation. Talk a little bit more about expectation in our lives.
Well, I'm not the normal person, but I have no expectation of anyone. So I have some friends that are late for everything, and I know that. And so I always am early for everything. And I know that about myself. And so I'm happy to show up early like I do. And in some ways, just expect that they're just going to be who they are and they're going to be late or they're going to cancel. And knowing that, I have like something else I could be doing if they do cancel. And then that way I'm not disappointed. I've taken personal responsibility for choosing to spend time with them. If they show up, great. If they don't, it's okay. And it's very unconditional. And yet, to take personal responsibility for everything, it feels really good. Talk about having the ultimate sense of control. That's it.
Mm. Yeah, personal responsibility can go a long ways. Years ago, I started asking myself in a lot of different situations in my life, how did I contribute to X, Y, and Z?
It's a
You
great
know?
question. That's a great question. And it really comes from a strength that you have to be able to address yourself first. Like, how did I participate in this?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It really takes us out of victimhood too, or
Yes.
victim mentality,
Yes.
because we can see people in our lives or witness others like in victim state. But then, I know I personally made the choice like, I don't want to remain in victim state. I don't want to remain in victimhood. I saw examples of how, that affected not only the entire life, but physically as well. And just holding on and, like not dropping. I'm going to say, not drop the rope. Yeah.
Yes. Because resentment really feels awful. And
Hmm.
whoever and whatever we're resenting, they are not suffering at all. So what is the purpose? Resentment eats its container, it's just, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Resentment eats its container. Because that's another thing I say. I'm like, if I find myself ruminating about something, I'm like, I'm only hurting myself right now.
It's so true.
Swipe it
There's
left.
this whole fantasy around, how we want others to feel, but it's a fantasy.
Hmm. But yeah, being an energetic being, I know that we send cords out when we're thinking about other people, but it's not doing the damage that we're imagining,
Yes,
is happening, or the conversation that we're imagining isn't happening, but the damage is happening to ourselves because we're triggering our nervous system, and our
yes.
body
No,
doesn't know the difference
it's
between
so,
like, yeah,
so
that
true.
person in front of us and not. Go ahead. You were going to say, Jamie?
Well, so when I am thinking about having a conversation with somebody else, I think to myself, what do I need from this person? And that is really helpful for me because if I know what I need and I know that person is not capable, then I can acknowledge what I need and I can also acknowledge that having this conversation is not going to be helpful. So, and that's a good way to kind of check in with myself when I'm feeling the need to talk to another about something specific that I'm not
Mhm.
comfortable with, whatever that is. But it's never about the other. I mean, never, ever, ever.
Mhm. Yeah, no. And I'm also glad that you pointed out like the capability of another person too, because a lot of times we find ourselves in situations where the other person isn't. And if we just look at ourselves and solve the issue within ourselves, you know, we can get our needs met right here,
Yes,
right now without even. And if we do feel like we want to sit them like down, we can do an aspecting exercise where we're in a chair, we sit them in a chair, their higher self, call their higher self into that chair and have that conversation if we need to physically get it out of our bodies or open up our fifth chakra and physically get it, the words out of our body. Have the energy of that person,
yes.
call the energy of that person in and do the work.
A
Yeah.
lot of people don't want these options. And I think that's kind of difficult for the people that do want the options because when you have kind of a high vibration life, you want everyone to have it. It's really important to remember a lot of people are not interested, they don't want it. So for you to share now whatever you're feeling and this whole, you have to be really careful not to assume that the other would want that. And that's okay too.
Yeah, 100% okay. I remember that realization years ago where I'm like, wow, not everybody thinks like me, acts like me. So, just pull it back, go into observer, be the witness, and it's all right here. Like you were saying, Jamie, bring it
Yes.
all back to you. Yeah. What are some suggestions if people are struggling with like coming back to the self? Like, oh, if I could really just explain myself, because I know a lot of people want to explain their side or have somebody see it their way, and they haven't unhooked from, controlling the other person or controlling the narrative that other people are carrying around. And because I think that there is that lesson in getting to the point where it doesn't matter where and what anybody else thinks, says, or does, right? There's a path to that lesson. So to our listeners, how can we encourage ourselves to get to that space where we can stay solid within ourselves and stay grounded and continue to come back to ourselves?
I think it's a journey and it really needs to be a gentle journey. I think we need to have something called loving curiosity about ourselves. And I think that it's very reassuring when we can get to that place where we're not judgmental about ourselves, but we're just curious. Um, but it is a process. And I think, it's different for everybody. There is no one way. Everyone has their own way of doing everything. And I think you should honor whatever that way is for you. There's no one perfect book or one exercise or one part of the journey is really getting to know yourself. Like, what is best for you and how you operate moment for moment? It doesn't have anything to do with another. And that's really gratifying.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I'm having a grounded moment I'm feeling right now with you, because what you just said, just continues to bring it back to ourselves, to bring us back to our center, to find our balance, find equanimity, within ourselves. And I think that that's important. And it's nice to be able to, for you, to be able to share these tools with other people, to be able to bring them back and, be questioning, like, and know thyself. How do I work? How do I function? Can I be aware and acknowledge when I'm triggered or I'm acting out of my wound or whatever it might be, and constantly like bringing it back to the self, or being able to watch our thought patterns and where are our thoughts going, and can we have awareness over those thoughts and kind of reel them in when we need to, or
And
not get
acknowledge it.
attached.
Yeah.
Yeah, not get attached and acknowledge, like you were saying, Jamie. Mhm. And then that takes us back into that creation. And you have a chapter in the book called Deliberate Creation.
Yeah. Yes. And I think deliberate creation is amazing. It really is. It's something you start to do the moment you start feeling better about yourself.
What does that look like, Jamie?
So I think you start to see every moment differently and every moment purposeful for yourself. And it's almost like you step into the ultimate power of the knowing that you can create anything that you want for you. And when you believe that, every opportunity just kind of opens its door. And you're able to walk through that door feeling like, of course I can. Of course I am. And yeah,
Hmm,
that's very powerful.
it is. I love that state. I talk about that in my new book, Living an Intuitive Life, finding that place within yourself where you find you're in a flow. and the doors just open, the breadcrumbs just come, life just flows. Even if we find ourselves in a pause, we know within ourselves that that pause is part of the flow. Because if we look at our life as a weave and we're weaving with the collective and we're just a single aspect, like maybe our single aspect is just waiting to be picked up by another thread, and it's not our time to weave in that moment. So taking a back seat and relaxing and just being in the present moment, allowing the pause that the universe is giving us, and then picking it back up again when we get that intuition or inspiration or idea that comes in. And it does, we end up in a nice flow. I like
Yeah.
that.
And everything feels easy. I mean, everything. It's effortless.
Hmm.
That's how it's supposed to be, people.
Yeah,
It's
really.
not supposed to be hard. It's supposed to feel effortless. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think, and I'm going to go back to this documentary because they talked about this too. It's like that pressure of doing this, that, and the other, working 9 to 5. Like, I don't want that in my life. I don't want to work 9 to 5 and barely take a vacation. And I want to relax and follow the flow and be in my own lane and, experience life and feel joy because I think, and you feel this way too. You talk about this in your book that life is all about joy. And I too feel that too. It's like this experience is about being in that flow and feeling that joy. What do you have to say about that, Jamie?
I'm like a pleasure junkie. I mean, I look for every opportunity to feel really good and to be joyful. So I just, that's really important for me. If it's not fun, I'm done. That's kind of my motto, you know?
Oh, I love that.
So,
If I'm not fun, I'm done. I
yeah,
love
if
that. And
it's
I like
not
the
fun,
term pleasure junkie.
yeah.
That's awesome. I could probably put that on my sticker on me too. Yeah. So, how can we find that joy in our life, Jamie? How can we reach that state?
First, give yourself permission. You have to give yourself permission. No one else is going to give you that permission. They're just not. So, feel like, yes, this is my birthright. This is my birthright to know myself, to find joy in every moment, to jump on joy when you see it in other people. Um, yeah, and appreciation feels so good. Like appreciation of yourself, appreciation of other people, appreciation of nature. Just the whole act of appreciation is just like very joyful.
Hmm. I agree too. And appreciation and gratitude puts you in that vibration where you attract more of that, more things to have appreciation and gratitude for.
Yeah.
Basically, simplify it. Yeah, lovely. I always ask my guests, I'm going to do it a little bit early. What is a jewel of wisdom that you would like to share with our audience today?
When you get into this better feeling place with yourself, you're going to have a lot less friends. And that's fine because most people really like drama and they like to hear about things that are not going well in your life.
Hmm.
And so um, when it happens, just be prepared because it does happen.
It does.
Yes.
I
Misery
have,
loves company.
yeah, I have been out and about and, enjoying myself and, conversing with everybody around a table. And there's a person that constantly like questions me, either about my past or a certain situation, or if they know something is happening in my life, like bringing that up, and I'm here like vibrating, laughing, enjoying conversation, and it just goes, just bring you down. And there is that misery loves company. Gosh, it
Yeah.
just happened to me about a week and a half ago. I'm sitting talking to somebody and they come up and, they said, oh, this, that, and the other is, happening in her life right now. Why? It's so fascinating.
I think it's threatening for people. when people are in a good place with themselves. And that's really their problem.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you're
I have
also an
found,
inspiration to so many people when you can just kind of just someone who's comfortable in their own skin. Whoever you sit with, you put people at ease. And that's a real
Mhm.
gift. So, yeah, don't stop being in your best place as your best self because of another.
Yeah. And even I want to, share with my guests, like when that happens, you do have the ability to flip that as well.
Yes,
You might hit a little like, that just happened, and you might want to take a pause and be like, okay, what's my choice here? But, I ended up having a great conversation filled with joy with the person that I was sitting with after that interaction. And we just laughed.
that's
We just
great.
laughed about life. And it was a beautiful moment because I think that we can find joy even when you are holding both in your life.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not bypassing it or, we acknowledged it. And, we had a joyful conversation about it, reflecting on how that shows up in both of our lives.
that's
And we
great.
even found humor, which was great. So,
Yeah.
everybody out there, you can flip it. Yeah. Yeah. I want to, speaking of past, I mentioned the past. You also talk about like old expectations and vibrations and being in the now or reactivating the old. So the difference between that being in the now as opposed to, triggering the reactivating the old, because I think that that can happen. And the story that I just shared is a prime example of that. So, holding both of those, what's your process, Jamie, of staying in the now instead of reactivating the old?
I think I have like a mantra. It's be here now. And that's really helpful for me. And there are moments where I get triggered. And as soon as I get triggered and I don't feel good, like I'm so sensitive to how I feel, I know immediately that this has nothing to do with my now. So it's almost like the trigger is like an emotional, like this isn't this doesn't feel good in this moment. And that's enough for me to kind of snap out of it and to, my mantra, be here now, and to kind of bring myself back to the moment. So, or to make the choice that this is old stuff, and for whatever reason, it's serving me by not serving me, and I'm not letting it go. And I give myself permission to be there too, but I don't have a very good tolerance for that. Um, so I think I give myself permission to not be my best self and not feel good. And very quickly, I'm on to my now because
Mm-hmm.
you start to not feel good. And when you're feeling good all the time and then not feeling good, mm, you just your tolerance is just not as big as it was before. I think a lot of people are wired for unhappiness, and I'm wired for happiness. So, yeah.
Yeah. Mm. I love what you said. Like I don't have the tolerance for it anymore.
Mm-mm.
And I really want to let that kind of settle too, because like where are we tolerating things in our lives a little too long? And when we start to find ourselves in a mood or we start to spiral or something, like, are you going to witness it? Are you going to see it? I'm reflecting on myself how, like I got triggered by something a couple weeks ago. And I was telling a friend, I'm like, I gave myself 5 minutes, and then I was done. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I've invested way too much of myself in this. It got triggered because of whatever. I am going to give myself 5 minutes and then I'm done. It's over.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And then, like take my power back because I think that we give our power back we give our power to those situations. And our power is giving our power away can sometimes look like ruminating on something for too long.
Yes. And it can be visceral. You can feel it in your body, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good reminder that we're not really going in the right direction with ourselves.
Yeah. And a lot of times I think from programming or society or our parents being difficult or whatever it might be, a lot of us can have a high tolerance for difficulty. So, and that high tolerance for difficulty gives us that programming, I forget the word that you used, that pattern of tolerating it a little bit too much or too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how can you rewire yourself and like reintegrate your process to be able to what is your word, reframe your experience?
And people think that reframing is denial. It's really not denial. It really isn't. Um, It's not going to change whatever the situation is, but it will change how you feel about it. And that's the most important thing. We're not going to change anything that's ever happened to us in the past. However, we can change how we feel about it. And I think all of our gifts have come as a result of all of the things that we've experienced throughout our lifetime. They become our superpowers if we can really understand it as gifts instead of as being the victims of whatever circumstances. So,
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, Jamie. 100%. Yeah, I would not be the woman I am today had not everything in my life happened to me.
yeah,
Yeah.
me too. And it's everyone else.
Hmm.
So, if you want to talk about your life, talk about it in a way where you can inspire others
Yeah.
to take all of their past and to bring it to their now and to understand that they are super powerful and hopefully appreciative for the things that they have experienced in their lifetime.
Yeah. And everybody out there, you might not experience that appreciation in the moment, but down the road, definitely that appreciation does settle in. And I think it's, comes from our resiliency. Excuse me, it comes from our resiliency to be able to rise above all of these things and, make that choice, as you were saying, to choose something different for ourselves, to choose not to wallow, but to choose to rise above it.
And then the ultimate goal, if you can get there, is to forgive every single person that has been there along your journey because they didn't know any better. They did, we all do the best we can. I'm a very strong believer in that. So
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. I think that brings us back to that purpose of our life that you talk about in the book, the purpose of our life being joy and changing our storyline or not being stuck in stories, and how important that is. As we wrap up this hour, Jamie, is there anything that you would like to say about like changing our storyline, purpose of our life being joy, coming out of our stories? How would you like to wrap up this hour, Jamie?
I would like to people to um, update their story as often as they update their computers. Or their phones or anything electronic because it's really worth it to check in with yourself and to update the tone of your story, a line of your story, a paragraph, a chapter, the entire thing, so that you can feel good and be an inspiration to yourself and others.
Mm, I love that, Jamie. Thank you. Upgrade ourselves. And we are powerful beings. Energetically speaking, time does not exist. We can go in the past, present, future. We can relive those things, reframe those things, rewrite those things. Yeah. So take advantage of, giving our life little upgrades. I love that.
Yeah.
Perfect. Jamie, it's been a pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for being on the show. How
Thank
can
you for
people
inviting
find
me.
you?
Mm.
Thanks.
I just have a website. It's www.jamie-lerner and .com. Everything is there.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Jamie. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. Again, I'm Liz Peterson, and this is Raise the Vibe with Liz. And you can find me everywhere at Raise the Vibe with Liz and raisethevibewithliz.com. Thanks, everybody. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks, Jamie.